Hi, my name is Shon with Reduce Cyber Risk, and this is the ongoing training for the CISSP, or Certified Information Systems Security Professional. Yeah, that's a lot of words. But bottom line is this is a supplemental course that's going to help with that training. And that supplemental course is designed to meet all the same requirements that you would with the CISSP. Now, one thing I've learned doing the CISSP was that you have to be a mile wide and an inch deep in the training. So what this is designed to do is to add to that training for you. So the purpose of it is going to be just some quick down and dirty things that you can help you become successful as a security professional within your organization. All right, so let's get started. So information security governance, what exactly is it? Now, honestly, it's one that I struggle with over and over again over time, because the simple fact of it is that it seems like these big $10 words, and you really, when you come right down to it, you don't know what they all mean. That's the one thing I struggled with, because realistically, I feel like sometimes I've got a third grade education. Even though it's not true, I do feel like that, because from a security standpoint, it always seems that they're using these big $10 words that I don't totally understand. So a little bit of background about me. I used to fly military aircraft, used to fly B-1 bombers, and then I got into the cyberspace and worked as a hacker. So I got to do some of those wonderful, cool things, but at the end of the day, I run into corporate America, and now as a security information, or as a chief information security officer, I see these big $10 words and I struggle. What the dickens do they all mean? Well, bottom line is they have meanings, and words have meaning. Well, what the information security governance is it's really about having a higher level of visibility for leadership so that they understand what exactly is going on within the information security program within their company. And so I'll throw out the definition, and then you can tell me what you think of it. But bottom line is security governance is a set of responsibilities and practices exercised by the board and executive management with the goal of providing strategic direction, ensuring that objectives are achieved, ascertaining that risks are managed appropriately, and verifying that the enterprise's resources are used responsibly. That's a mouthful. A lot of big $10 words, and yeah, that's a way bad run-on sentence. But at the end of the day, it kind of spells out exactly what information security governance is. And it comes down to the responsibility of the senior execs and the board. And it is. Overall, information security is their responsibility. And it's also the security officer's responsibility, but again, it's the board and senior management and senior leadership. It's also to provide leadership for the information security program within your organization. It gives them guidance, direction on what they need to do, and defined objectives for your specific security program. And what it comes down to is if you have this defined out and brought in a bulletized format, it helps give you objectives and milestones to shoot for. So what you have to do is you have to keep the end in mind. And that comes down to a strategic plan of how you're actually going to get there. And so this really comes down to is what is your plan? Now, you could be a chief information security officer. You could be the local janitor. Doesn't matter. I've done all those jobs and they are wonderful. But bottom line is security is your responsibility, especially if you're watching this video. And so with that being in mind, you need to come up with strategic plans to help with your organization. But it's also leadership's responsibility as well to help you with that. And you need to take a risk-based approach. Being in the military, I can tell you, I've had plenty of times where the government will spend bazillions of dollars and bazillions of dollars to try to protect their networks, but at the end of the day, people can still get into them. So you have to decide from a risk-based approach, how do you want to best protect your environment and how do you want to have your security program set up? It also helps you with the management of resources and integrating IT into the information security field. It also finally is about some measurements and metrics are a big deal. They really are. You need to understand how are you going to measure what you're accomplishing and what do you need to do to fix the problem. Now, security practices. What are these security practices? They're a collection that define an organization. They really are. And they're integrated and imposed in various forms or purposes by different needs or requirements. What exactly does that mean? Right. So the big $10 words is that's a really cool sentence with lots of big words that maybe didn't say a whole lot. But what it comes down to is let's say, for instance, you have a company and your company is regulated. And it could be regulated by DFARS. Okay, this is a defense acquisition something or other. Yeah, I see, I don't even know what it means, but bottom line is a DFARS, if you're a vendor, this U.S. government requires you to have a cybersecurity program in place. It could be that you are fall under CFATS, which is the Chemical Facility Anti-Terrorism Standards. That could be an issue. You could have a requirement where the vendors require you to be ISO 27001 certified. So you may have some regulatory or compliance requirement, i.e. GDPR, which is regulatory, that are forcing you to do various security practices. You may have industrial standards that you may have to meet for that. And it happens a lot in the case of ISO 27001, especially if you have to create something. I've seen vendors that have had to maintain a certain certification for the International Standards Organization, I think it's ISO 27001, and it's a very specific criteria that you have to meet. The other thing is there's audit and assessments of these governance principles. They should occur. You should be audited and you should be assessed based on the principles. And these usually are based on frameworks that we'll get into later on in the CISSP course. But it comes right down to it is that that's how they follow those frameworks. You follow them, and that's what you're usually audited against. The NIST is the NIST 853 and 800-100. And you're like going, what is that? Well, bottom line is there are regulations that are in place for the National Institute of Standards and Technology for the U.S. government. And these are standards that were provided for the Department of Defense when they come up with systems. How do they make sure that they meet a certain criteria? And this happened a lot when I was flying airplanes. When you fly, the airplanes are supposed to fly the same way. And they didn't always fly the same way, but they had standards on how they created the plane, and they had to follow those standards. Well, NIST saw this where it was coming into cyber world, and therefore they needed some standards that were put in place. Now, I talked about the International Standards Organization, ISO. There's another set of standards that are more globally in nature. NIST is United States based, whereas ISO is a global responsibility and a global organization. Now, as you're talking about NACD, not naked, but NACD. Naked and their benefits, not naked, NACD, sorry. NACD, the National Association of Corporate Directors. So they put out some guidance around this. And these are the people that have boards, right? That they kind of help align with what does a board look like. And they're people that are memberships of NACD, not naked, NACD. They're members of that. And so there's 4 practices that they recommend boards need to have to operate. One is an information security on the agenda. You need to talk about it. You can't stick your head in the sand like an ostrich and say it doesn't exist. You have to be able to talk about it. The other one is to identify information security leaders. Do you have people in place that will be your leaders for your company? And they are in the security space. The other thing is an effective corporate information security policies. So not just one, but do you have multiple policies in place that focus on your information security program? And then finally, you assign information to key committees for support. And the purpose of that is that if you have a committee that's keeping the security person abreast and supporting that person, that's a positive thing. So those are the 4 practices that boards need to have to operate. Now, what are the benefits of governance? Now, accountability, right? So if you have some level of oversight, some governance, you have accountability to ensure that the data is properly being protected and that other people are looking at it. They're not just taking my word for it, right? So Shon's the best CISO in the world. We'll take his word for it. No, it's probably not a good idea because guess what? I make mistakes. So it's good to have accountability and have oversight into what is actually occurring. It's also an integration of risk management. Now, my view of risk management is different than the people that do it for a living and their ideas of risk management. So it also incorporates that into the process and getting other people involved. It's protection also in some respects from some level of civil or legal liability. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to be protected. And also, a disclaimer, I ain't a lawyer, not going to happen. I ain't even someone that can speak English well, because I used ain't twice in a sentence. But bottom line is that you need to talk to a lawyer, especially if you are an organization that is looking for add cybersecurity to your to protect your company. But bottom line is they've seen and they've witnessed that protections from civil and legal liabilities have occurred if you put security programs and security governance in place. Doesn't mean it's going to go away, but it can have less of a sting potentially. And there's also plenty of other benefits around governance. I just wanted to throw a couple out there so that you understood what we were kind of getting at. Now, business integration, what does that mean? Well, it's not just an IT issue to resolve the challenge. It really isn't. You're integrated at all levels of the organization. And it comes down to, I've seen it so often where, well, IT's got that. Well, this is an IT issue. Well, it's not an IT issue. It's a business issue. IT is one capability within the business, but at the end of the day, it's still a business issue. And so it needs to be integrated at all levels of the business, so that all the way from down to me as the guy that cleans out the toilets, all the way up to the guy that has multiple homes and multiple cars. Yeah, I have multiple cars. They're just really, really old. But bottom line is that it needs to be at all levels. Also managed by a group or a committee. Again, that's where we come back to the committee piece that NACD had said you have some level of oversight and some groupthink around how you're going to protect the business. And then you also can report these findings to the board of directors. That's another part of business integration. The board needs to be aware of it. It's not just a IT issue. Now, as we're going to get into some key parties that should be involved and a little bit of reason why that is. Now, as we're talking about that, the board of directors and the trustees of the business. Now, some businesses don't have that, and realistically, I think I've seen a board a couple times, right? Never been on a board. Kind of scares me. Want to kind of sit in the corner and suck my thumb and go, I don't like it, don't like it. But no, in reality is that these are the people that are entrusted for the business. And they have the best understanding of strategic risks and how the business is properly set itself aligned. Do they have, is there a risk with outside competitors? Is there a global risk from a competitor standpoint? Or is there intellectual property concerns that someone might steal it? They have the best connection of what that looks like. Are they in a position for a hostile takeover? They would know that. Not that I really know what that means, but they would know that. And that they're aware of any information aspects, IP, privacy data, etc. Now, the executives, they usually are the data owners within your company. They are ultimately responsible for the data and the protecting of the data. That's the ones that do it. Now, they may entrust their thoughts to people like myself to help them with that, but at the end of the day, the data belongs to them. Now, steering committees, we kind of talked about this a little bit as well. Members of the board or executives and security that are part of this committee to help guide the strategic view of where you're going to take your organization and how you're going to protect your data. They also best understand the culture and the organizational objectives of the company. As we all know, the culture is very different from company to company. And so the steering committee will help bridge that gap and understand what that could be. Now, your chief information security officer, me, guy like me, they can be legally responsible for information security. And it's becoming bigger and bigger issue where as a CISO, you are legally responsible for the data. That's a scary proposition because realistically, I don't always have control of the data and I don't always have control of the security. Sometimes these decisions were made before I even showed up. So as a security professional, be careful what you wish for because you never know what you're going to get. And the CISO will also provide strategic direction based on your organizational objectives, which then come down from the executives and from the board. So they kind of help drive those things forward within a company. Now, you're trying to be asking yourself, what are my next steps for building an information security governance program? Well, you need to understand and communicate the purpose of the governance. Okay, so are you going to be draconian and have very strict see, I had the word, but I lost it because my third grade education just kicked in. You have very strict guidelines and areas that you can only limit people to. There's a better word, but I can't think of it. And then cyber risk can be a business impact. So you need to understand and communicate this governance situation to them. You also need to understand what is your reputational damage, if any, in the case of a cyber attack. I was in a situation just recently where we're talking about the front end of our websites, right? And there were some licensing issues, and the licensing came down and said, well, it's too expensive. Well, that's an IT person making that decision. Is that the business making that decision? Not necessarily. So what ends up happening is, well, IT says, well, it's $10,000 too much or $50,000 too much. Well, if your company's a $100 million company or that brand is a $100 million brand, is 50 grand too much to keep the site from getting hacked? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it's something that you are concerned about, and maybe you're not really concerned about it. Just kind of depends. Board and senior leaders. Now, these people will provide the strategic direction, right? And they're the ones that you need to get on board with this. They'll have the help with the policy, the strategy, and help define the risk. Okay, so you need to understand that. Oh, back up on the understanding part is your legal liability. You need to really kind of get a good example of that and work with your lawyers to help you kind of put that into place. The board and senior leaders as well need to be able to provide you the resources you need to be successful. They align the responsibilities as well on who's responsible for what. I like to call them RR&Es, your roles, responsibilities, and expectations. They help set those with you, and they also help set what is the expectations for the organization. They also help set priorities. What is a priority for the organization? Now, that would be your CIO in many cases, would be your IT leadership. But the board may say, yeah, that's great, but we really want you to focus on this because it's more valuable. Again, board and the senior leaders, they just must be involved. And for this to work, for you to have a good program, they've got to be involved. Next steps, part 2. Okay, that means 2 in French, I think. So, next steps, part 2. All right, your senior management action. They must provide some level of oversight for you. And they must lead the security policy creation to help guide where you're going to create your policies and what you're going to do with them and what's in them. They're going to define the RR&Es, again, for what are your security roles, responsibilities supposed to be, and how should you be adequately measured against them. They'll analyze and monitor threats and vulnerabilities. That's where you want senior management to also back you on that. Now, they may not be doing it, probably are not doing it, but they should support you, and that's what you want them to do. And they should also help support the fact that monitoring is enabled and periodic reviews of security are occurring. All of these things are key pieces. And then finally, security awareness training and education program is in place. That are some key steps that you need to look at. So from all of those, if you start looking and focusing down these paths, you'll be very successful, because this is a good way for like a little mini framework on where you need to go to create a security governance program for your company. Now when we're getting into expectations, you need to consider strategic thinking for your business. We talked about that at the beginning, is what is a strategic plan? Well, you need to consider your IT security costs and your security policy creation. How do those play into strategic vision for your company and where you're planning on going? As an example, if you say, you know what, we're selling off all of our company, and you want to put in place a policy for or say we're selling off all of our European company or business, but yet you're focused on GDPR. Well, is that really a good use of your resources? Probably not. So you need to understand what is your strategic thinking for your business. You need to communicate your IT strategy policies with the business themselves. Talk to them about what you're trying to accomplish and why you're trying to accomplish it. And then define security incidents and what is the business aspect behind them. So often I've seen it where an incident will come up and people don't even really know what to do with it, let alone try to convey that to the business and figure out what is the impact of it. You know, you have a situation where a hacker takes over a system and you have ransomware and it installs on a critical server. The critical server is no longer available. What do? How's that going to impact your business? Could be substantial, right? So those things have to be considered. Also, establishment of business continuity plans. So as we talk about in the CISSP, your business continuity plan is what operates and lets you keep your business going. And it might be a very specific business aspect that you have in place. But that is your business continuity plan. And you want to ensure that those are in place if needed. Now, as it comes down to expectations, you set those around risk management. You need to account and protect IT assets based on risk, not based on how you feel, just based on the risk of the system. Is it the most critical? Is it not? If it's not, why even spend a whole lot of time and energy and effort on it? Restrict access to critical data. You know, you need to limit that, right? If you can limit access to these critical data and restrict it and put protections on it, you dramatically reduce the risk to your company. Also, vulnerabilities and incident planning. Plan for those. You need to have a plan in place to deal with your incidents because they will come up. It's a guaranteed it's going to happen. I guarantee you. Now, you pray that it's small, but at the end of the day, it will happen. And you need to develop continuity plans that need to be executed. And what is the plan in place for those to occur? So those are some of the expectations on those. Now, resource management. You need to help account for assets. As you're looking to manage the resources within your organization, you need to account for the assets. And that's a key part, an inventory plan. You need to do an inventory to understand what do you actually have within your company and what are the assets in place. And you also need to ensure that IT and their services and infrastructure, whether it's internal or outsourced to a third party, can recover from issues that they uncover. You need to ensure the performance of the network and that it's solid, it's always working. And then measurement. You need to look and understand what are the different types of events that are occurring within your environment and how to best alert on those, from obsolete accounts, malware, elevated privileges, etc., etc. So the more you can have those things in front of you, the better off you are, and the quicker you will resolve them if you're constantly looking at them. Now, what's the evolution of this? Well, guess what? Security is evolving. Just like I was listening to a commercial, and some gentleman said that he was swimming in the ocean. He goes, you know what? As we're swimming in the ocean, the coral, our long lost ancestors. I'm like, I did not come from a coral. So, but maybe somebody did, right? But it's evolving, just like the coral is evolving into us, and we are evolving from the coral. Security is evolving, and organization assets become more valuable as the time goes on. Why? Because they're everywhere, and we have more sensitive data that's inside these things, and they're like little vacuum machines that suck up all kinds of data. All these assets do. So it's also a necessity to address the legal and regulatory issues. More and more companies are creating things that are going to be regulatory issues you're going to have to fight through. And it could be a competitive advantage or a disadvantage depending upon how well you handle it or decide not to deal with it. One of the two. Privacy and cybercrime is growing. Why? It's all about the money, baby. Show me the money and I'll show you the bad guys. Why? Because there's money there. If there's money there, they're after it. They want an easy buck and they want to make it happen. So in some respects, I don't blame them. Don't agree with it, but don't blame them. So it's also tentacles of various law enforcement agencies are everywhere. So now you've got the issues of Interpol, you've got FBI, you've got all these other all these other law enforcement agencies that are involved, and they all talk, not necessarily to each other, but they do talk. And so that's becoming a bigger and bigger issue. And then finally, critical infrastructure is increasingly targeted. So you've got your power plants. They're being targeted. Why? Well, because they make a big impact. Not because they have money. It's because they make a big impact. If I can shut down the power grid to New York City, I have no idea if you could even do that. Probably can at some point. Then the whole city goes black. Well, guess what? I can stand up and say, street cred, I did it. It's all me. And those things are becoming a bigger and bigger issue. The sad part is that people, unfortunately, may get hurt seriously because of these things and potentially even die because of a system that may get hacked in the future. So that's where the evolution is going. It's becoming much riskier, and the data is becoming more valuable. Now, this is I saw some research items out there that are kind of interesting. And the Aberdeen Group research, they talked about this. 90% of risk can be reduced by implementing known and commonly used security practices. Boom, 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 boom. And that's for sure. I guarantee you. If you can reduce, you can, now you're not going to eliminate the bad guys getting into you, but man, you can dramatically reduce some person from getting into your network if you would do the best practices. Now, you can't always do them, but if you just did 90% of them or 80%, well, that's 80% more than most people do. So it's important to do that. Now, IT Governance Institute, they had this, and they said firms operating at best-in-class security levels are lowering financial losses to less than 1% of revenue, whereas other organizations are experiencing loss rates that exceed 5%. Okay, so the guy who's not a math major can barely spell my names, hence it's phonetic, S-H-O-N. Haha, see, I'm brilliant. The context of that is a $1 billion company. So let's just say your revenue is $1 billion. And that's a good size, medium-sized business. Kind of pushing a little bit on the large, but more on the medium-sized business. Well, to put it in perspective, 1%, okay, so 1% of $1 billion is $10 million. Okay, so if you can drop your losses to less than $10 million, which I still think is a gob of money, then versus your organization that can bring it to 5%, which is $50 million, that's a big difference just for putting in best-in-class security. Now, I would argue that best-in-class security, at what point do you go too far and end up overspending to try to get that extra level of protection? So that's the sweet spot you got to try to figure out. Now, some questions you need to ask, and these are just a few questions to kind of get your juices going. But does the board or senior leaders understand the company's dependence on information and the associated systems? Is there a CISO or other designated officer who's specifically tasked with managing information security within your organization? Yeah, and you get there's a lot of companies or regulations that are coming out now that you have to have somebody designated. Now, it could be a third party, but someone has to be designated as a security person. Are there appropriate training and awareness programs ensuring employees, contractors are aware of the security responsibilities? And is there an incident response plan or process to deal with security incidents or situations? Now, this is just these are just 4 questions of a gob of questions you can ask yourself. But bottom line is it's just to kind of get your thoughts going, your juices flowing, as they would say. Now, how do you compare your organization? You need to look at some self-assessment goals, and this helps provide a litmus test about your organization and how you're doing. It provides also guidance on security targets for the future. What are you trying to accomplish? And these are how you're self-assessing. Am I good? Do I live or do I die, per Caesar? So you have to decide, how is that? And now you can also wing it and say, hey, we're awesome. But if you get hacked, you're not so awesome. So those are things you got to really be honest with yourself, and you got to hope that your leadership wants to be told the truth. You need to plan projects to reach these targets. Okay, so you've figured out what your targets are. Now you got to plan projects to make it happen. And you got to prioritize your work based on the risk and the impact analysis. Again, it's all about the risk, hence the name, reduce cyber risk. So we're going to kind of talk about some key points here in these maturity models, starting at 0, going all the way up to 5. So 0 basically means it don't exist. You have nothing, so no security program at all. You are totally reactionary, and there's nothing. You're like going, yeah, I know risk management is important, but yeah, I'm not going to do it. Business does not value or consider the vulnerabilities and the issue. Yep, not going to do it. So where do these people fall? Well, in many cases, in my experience, again, my experience is a little bit less than many people in regards to this, but my experience is it's usually small businesses are kind of fall in the non-existent period. They have no money. They're trying to make things happen, and the last thing they want to do is talk about security. They're going, yawn. This just takes away time that I'm trying to make money. So that, again, not all small businesses by any stretch of the imagination, but I see this commonly within the small business world. Maturity models. Okay, the other one is, and number 1 is initial or ad hoc, which basically means you've got something on the books a little bit, and you're kind of making it as it goes, and you're totally reactive, but you have something, right? You just kind of stuck your big toe into the water to kind of feel how it is, and then you'd go from there. They're very informal with limited authority, but that's the ad hoc model. It's repeatable. See, I can't even speak. Repeatable, but intuitive, which basically means it's important and we're still growing. It's in the fertile stage. It's in the paramecium stage, wanting to evolve into the monkey that gets his tail ripped off as he stands up because he's in so much pain, right? So it's in the amoeba stage, right, where it's just growing, immature. It's assigned to individuals as additional duties with no management authority, and the responsibilities assigned but still fragmented. This is not a bad place. I know a lot of people that are in this place. I'm in this place in some places where it is repeatable, but it's not that intuitive, and there is a lot of hands-on stuff that has to occur, which isn't very good. So, and again, a company may have pieces where you're number 5 in one spot and number 1 in another spot. Hopefully you're not number 0. That would be bad. Just don't do that. Defined process is number 3. It's a risk management policies are in place, then defined risk assessments. Yay. Security awareness exists and is being promoted, which is a good thing. And management is involved. Big winner. Pull out the bell and start banging on that gong. That's a big thing. Number 4 is managed and measurable. Risk assessments are considered standard operating procedure. This happens so often where they're not. Well, if you can get into level 4, that's a big win. It really is. And responsibilities for information security are clearly defined. Again, you may have pieces of this that are in place and other pieces that are not. So that doesn't mean that you're a 4 or a 1. It means you just need to be realistic with how do you really see yourself and compare yourself to that things. And then finally, responsibilities and standards are enforced. Now it comes to the granddaddy, the grand poobah. Number 5 is optimized. Risk management is developed to a structured, organized process. Okay, you're hearing lights and songs of birds flying around and little butterflies. Information security is a joint responsibility of the business and IT leadership. Key thing there, big boys, and girls, that's huge. And then business continuity and continuous service plans are integrated and aligned. Everybody's in alignment that they will have continuous business operation in the event of issues. Okay, so what we just went over was the information security governance and what do you need to do to put in place and some key things to think about as you are putting that in place. Here's some of the training that we got it from. I've got my information from is ISC Squared's Training Guide, April 2018 edition. That's a really good book. Recommended if you're looking for the CISSP. Awesome book, really is. Lots of information, gobs of information. And then ISACA is talking about some of the stuff around board of directors and how to talk to the executives as well. They have a really good paper. It's about 70 some pages long, but it's a really good paper, and I'd highly recommend checking it out. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Again, this is about the Information Security Governance Program and creating that tied into my CISSP supplement that goes into my CISSP course that is available for purchase. All right, have a great day, and we'll catch you on the flip side. See ya.